Okay. Morning, guys. Assume you can hear me okay. I'm good. See who's in. Just let me know if you can hear me. My beautiful baritone voice. And we get up and racing. Let's get myself organised. Just have to check a couple of things. Good to go. All right, Brooke, fantastic. How are you? Now, overnight, so not a lot happened. It was actually a strange move on the SPY. So we'll get over to that first. There's a couple of weird moves. I wouldn't expect. I mean, the only thing I can attribute that to, that rally, I mean, that was a day session, did nothing. As soon as it opened up around 5 o'clock, it started to lift, and we lifted when European markets were sort of stronger than heading south a bit. US actually opened up, so when the US opened, it was about 11:30, so they gapped up around this stage. We went sideways, and then they sold off. We went up, so it's kind of a, to me, that was weird sort of a price action on the SPY, which I'm leaning towards that spiking and then another sell-off. But this kind of level of 59.62 holding, we'll just see. It just seems to be, that overall action. If I can get rid of all this, look, it's buoyant. We've come off pretty well off that 58.18 zone, off that support zone. We've got a couple of legs up, but it might be that this leg up, if you see, let me just check that rally there. Look, it brings us. We could expand up to, if we expand that up, and that's our support zone. We'll expand up through 62 to 59.98 today. I mean, we'll have to see how it goes. Yeah, just that rally there, I can't sort of attribute it to anything apart from maybe the Chinese data out yesterday, which was at midday. So it takes 5 hours for them to respond. They want to respond overnight. In a thin market, it's kind of maybe a bit of a trap's been laid for this level. Maybe it spikes up. You spike up here and we get selling on into the close. Drag it up on the open and sell the shares into the into retail buying. But we'll see. Now, Nikkei intraday action here. We've got that sort of level between 23,520 and then 23,425. The market's opened up weak. It was capped there for a while. Now it looks like it's just heading south. So we're going to check two things, whether it's not just a washout and we retrace back into the zone like this, flush the zone and hold the inside high or low. What you'd be looking for is more a lower high coming, a pop back up and then lower highs when you get sellers coming back into the market looking to roll this over. So at the moment, we're still above the longer term MA. It looks like the shorter term have flattened out a bit and we're just expanding to the downside. So it could be an outside in, as in we just flush the level and we bounce back in. But we'll have to see. It's going to take some more time for that to play out. Now, the Dow, we've got this sort of ramp up. We pushed up into that 28,190 zone and failed off there. It's whether or not this continues and we find support at 27,920, flush lower, find support and lift it back into the European Open or later on. Okay, Jason. Whether that plays out, trend in the short term is down, obviously. It's whether or not that trend can continue. This sort of flush lower and then bounce when we're back above the whole moving average leads me to believe that we're going to get supported again. It's just the usual scenario, I guess, with the Dow overnight in a thin market. It's easily buoyed. It's not really that, not bearish at all. The US was up overnight. They did give up, apart from the NASDAQ. NASDAQ opened strong. All three indices opened strong. There's some good data come out at 10:30, I think, in the US, which is supportive of their economic growth or whatever it is, recovery, I guess. That was supportive and led the markets to open, gap up in the open, but then the Dow and the S&P faded into the close, whereas the NASDAQ was still supported. It doesn't really want to go down. So maybe a bit of a buy the dip in the NASDAQ scenario again, but we'll look at that in just a second. It's still capped with some fairly significant resistance, just minor as well. A minor level, but significant in the fact that if it holds, it's going to lead us to lower levels. So it is another thing with the US, some of that data is pointing towards inflation. Now, we'll see what out tonight is the FOMC meeting, the statement on interest rates. Now, they're going to let inflation go, but if inflation starts building, people will start to factor in a stronger dollar, which is going to kill a lot of, prices. I think because a lot of people built short on in stimulus and flooding the market with dollars. Now, if they just look to leave inflation going, I don't know how they're going to, apart from raising rates, what they're going to do to combat higher inflation. But if that starts to be the case and we start to pick up with data's been coming out better than expected, a lift in manufacturing, factory action, or whatever you say, if it's starting to grow, then that I would expect to put pressure upside on the US dollar because people have been looking towards raising rates. Now they know that the Fed's going to leave it longer, let it flow, or let inflation pressures build a bit longer than they normally would. But the one real way to combat inflation is raising interest rates. Now they're already well and truly low. That's what's kept the US dollar, that and the flood of cash into the US dollar has kept it low. Now the flood of cash seems to have stopped. There's no more stimulus just yet. There's no more even talk of stimulus just now. They can't come to some sort of agreement when you talk about raising rates potentially, then that could drive the US dollar higher, squeeze out some shorts, and start to trigger a lot of action into or volatility into the currencies. And you would expect that that could really cause a bit of a problem for equity markets as well. As in, if that's going to start to be the case, then that cheap money may not be available anymore. There's no more stimulus to keep the ball rolling. So we'll see how that plays out tonight and what the markets start to tell us. Now the Hang Seng pressed up in this 24,920 zone, which is previous sort of support, became resistance. The trend is up. The recent trend is up. We're holding inside higher lows, so higher low. Most recent one potentially is at 24,690. Now, if that holds, we might get a flush lower and then a bounce, but we'll see how it goes. So yesterday we sort of took out that zone and then bounced straight back and rallied. We'll see if we get some of that action today. Otherwise, if we sort of flush down too far and then start to grind back up, if we get sort of grindy action higher on the lower time frames, which we'll talk about more in the intraday channel, the live trading channel at 11 o'clock, remember. If we get some of that grind higher and start to hold some lower highs, we could be failing back off this level like we have previously. Right? The difference previously, once we break and retested it, the major trend was down there, the major trend is up. So it's just to see whether if we bust through that, we're going to be looking for some pullbacks to buy into again. And it could be another good day. Could be another flow-on effect from their numbers yesterday. So just keep an eye on that. They're good data into China. So let's get over to SPY's going to open up in a couple of minutes. We'll see if someone just reminds me. We'll have a look at that at 9:50 or when we knock it on the head. Now the US dollar. Okay, so it's just starting to lift. This is what I just want to take a look at that to see if this pop higher. If we hold the MAs for too long, I'm expecting it to wash up and maybe target up towards that 93.40 zone again, which would pressure all the other currencies down. Basically, the euro down, Aussie down, and the pound down. But potentially we've got some setups. So just keep an eye on some of those currencies during the day. Hey, how you going? Is it Sinner 1010? Sinner sounds good. So your currencies, if that dollar rallies, you expect them to pressure lower. Now we've got potential breakdown. I don't want to be caught not doing this. The problem is, with them at these hours, they can easily flush a level. That looks like a great short to me. We've had this run up. We had a lot of buyers building up, holding. We've had this squeeze. It hasn't squeezed everyone out, but if this level starts to break, it could potentially squeeze. And we had that run down, break in the uptrend below the MAs. Could easily break and run through 83.97, say. Your stop could be above. Same token, it could flush lower and then jam up. So you just got to be wary outside of hours when you've got the UK and US sessions. The major trading into FX is you do get some obviously in the Asian session. It's not as big as when you come into Europe and obviously the US. So we'll just see if there's a bit of a squeeze lower. There could be some action on the downside. It could even just go down to this low. So if you get down to this low, it's 20 pips in that or so. But you want a tighter stop than what you place it. So just looking at that half an hour chart, if the US dollar keeps powering higher, if we start to break higher in the US dollar, out of this trend down, then that could lead us obviously going to lead to a move down in the euro. Look at the Aussie too. Aussie potentially starting to break down off that zone. This zone before was at 70, 73, busted through, straight back down. And if we can hold this level here and start to break down through those lows, it could be a bit of a squeeze on longs built up from yesterday. Now the pound, obviously, that looks more buoyant than anything else. And that's got to do with they had a big sell-off because of the Brexit issues. Now, if there's more news, I think good old Boris is having a few problems getting it through his own party, let alone the opposing party, and through Parliament. His changes, which is basically just divorced from Brexit, are hard to exit. Now, if that doesn't get through, there might be a few shorts that see that, okay, that's not going to happen. Markets could squeeze higher. It's going to have, if the US dollar pushes higher, it's going to have a few headwinds. So this may just flush and bounce and get bought at the dips on the back of the Brexit news. We'll just see. We'll just keep an eye on that one. Whereas the yen, we were talking about this yesterday. Well, not really yesterday, but we spoke about this in the morning report, saying that looks like it could extend that move down, which it did, but not after a flush. Okay, it sort of caught a few buys. Anyone that's got stops just above here got flushed in. Any shorts from here, maybe you got squeezed out again, and then we turned around and just dumped. And that was all around, coming in when the US dollar started to move, and that dumped into that 105.30 zone, which we're talking about. Whether that's, it could push a bit lower, but that's a fairly good zone there. So a rally in that would line up with a rally into the US dollar too. We'll just see. Now, Euro US support, we'll just take a look. For me, if it doesn't hold up here, around 118.40, 35 to 40, I think they can play a lower. You've got this downtrend. Then you've got, you've got other levels coming at 118.27, 25, and further down here at around 118.10, and then a major swing low at around, well, you've got this support, not really a swing low, some key support down here. Just draw that in, just so I remember. So that your key support down at 117.55. So it gets a bit of a move on. It could run lower, but I wouldn't expect too much action into either, to a lot of the currencies. I mean, it could be completely wrong. You might get the dollar start to squeeze higher outside of ours coming into FOMC, which is hours away yet. You might get that sell-off. So the rally into the US dollar might have that flow on where now you get the Asian session start to readjust to the dollar. And your currency positions maybe start to square up some positions, and then you get basically same again into the European session, which could all mean that a US dollar bit of a push higher, squeeze higher, and the other currencies squeeze lower. Let's take a look at a couple of cryptos. They were a bit mixed overnight. We had a Bitcoin 30-minute chart. Had some movement up into Bitcoin, which has just given up those gains since I've done the report. So we had this move up into Bitcoin, but others like Ethereum and Ripple and the other majors that we look at headed south. So I think it's still looking a bit heavy to me. That action's it's not really bullish. It's too choppy. You're getting sort of flush out of the lows, rally sold into quite heavily. Excuse me. You shouldn't really see on a rally like that, if it's really, really bullish, you shouldn't see that deeper pullback from this leg higher. So look, it could be and if this becomes a lower high, if we start attacking down towards 10.7 again, which is only about $80 away, we start coming down to these lows, that to me becomes a lower high, and we could start to really flush down and flush out some of these buyers that built up. Now, the daily chart's probably the key for me. We're having that pullback. We want to see, again, like we spoke about before, that zone through here at around 10.2 to 10, say 10.2, 10.3. 10,300, if that can hold. So we could be coming down on a shorter term basis to retest that zone and hold a key high low on the daily. And then if it starts to lift again, that could be quite nice. And that could lead us to a push back up to 11, 12,000 above. Whereas Ripple, which is on the daily now, don't really like that flush lower. I think if we can sort of grind low and we hold again, it could be the same situation. We could still keep this longer term trend up. We touched on the MAs, the longer term MAs. We just squeezed out some of these buyers. We dragged in some with this move up through 442 and then basically dumped on them straight back down to take out the anchor level to that uptrend. And now it's, when you take out the anchor, you've got to remember we're going to be looking towards, what are we going to contract? Are we going to go down? Are we going to go sideways? But you're sort of discounting another move up. You just don't break through an anchor and then turn around and rally straight back up. Unless you're the share market, which get money thrown at it left, right, and center. So we'll see what happens. I mean, that longer term trend is still up. We just want to see this, basically this level at 309 hold. Wouldn't mind seeing some, contractive action down here, start to hold these inside levels. If you get a bit of contraction, then I think then when we start to get that break up, well, that's what I'll be looking for. That contraction, you got lower highs and higher lows, come to that point of agreement, and then bang, you can really refine your entry there, because you can take a smaller hit, or you know exactly where your risk is. It's a lot smaller, and the potential payout when it expands back up again is, instead of taking something here with a break up here and you potentially got your risk a lot lower, it's a 1-to-1. You could have 3 or 4-to-1. So we'll see. That's probably about it. We had crude punch up because they had, let's just go back to the 30-minute chart. Crude punched up like we're talking about. More on the hurricane supply issues, okay, or US supply, not really global, just US supply. And that lifted, and that's probably more of a short squeeze on this key support zone at 37.20. So it's more that you've got these shorts built up, shorts still built up here, that started to hold, and they've just given up the ghost. Anyone that's shorting in this zone through here and it didn't kick on, they're the ones being squeezed out. Now, there is still global demand concerns, I guess, that's holding price action down, which may continue to hold price action down. Now, if the turnaround the hurricane dies off, expect potentially another move back down to support it around 37.20, because it's only really US supply, it's not global. Well, it is. Copper, third time, 1, 2, 3, touched on that 309 zone, previous highs. It's still well and truly locked in a range at this stage. So any sort of negative US dollars lifting that quite quick. And then, once the US dollar bounces back, it's reacting. But anytime it gets too far down near these lows, it's getting bought up, because then you've got supply concerns, or weak supply or low supply levels buoying the market at this stage. Gold, actually, quickly tip on gold. Now, gold is obviously just moving around with the US dollar. I think if it can't hold up, if it starts to break down below 1950, you've got this rally up here. The gold bugs might start to come into pressure, and we could get a bit of a squeeze out of, especially these longs. Now, if it starts to hold here and we start to get higher lows hold, then a press up through 1958 may lead us on a move back to 1972 and above. Okay, because we still got this longer term trend off these highs, which I've marked in here. It could be, it's probably a few different levels to be looking at. Problem is it's been holding here. Yeah, so it's potentially, it's that downtrend. We've got a significant support zone around 1910 we've been looking at, and the inside support which is holding at 1937. It's just that this little pop up off this key support, we may not have finished the downside just yet. With this US dollar, now if the US dollar does rally, expect some downward pressure into gold. We'll see. All right, guys, I'll call it a day there. Now, only short and sharp. We'll see. Let's see with a SPY open. Aussie SPY. It's resilient at this stage. It's just flushed out the low. If we can get some sort of higher lows, we might expand up through 59.62. The Nikkei is just back above, so maybe that's a flush. So we'll just keep our eyes on those. All right, guys, thank you very much for joining us. Remember, if you like what you hear, it'd be great if you could leave us a like on our YouTube channel. Sign up if you already haven't, or subscribe if you already haven't. Help us spread the word. And remember, if you want more info on the live trading Discord channel, just email support@tradesetup.com.au. All right, guys, enjoy your day. I'll speak to you soon.